Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm of course your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 288th episode, our guest is Robbie Bach. Robbie Bach is a best-selling author and former tech executive who helped lead Microsoft through some of its most dynamic years. As Chief Xbox Officer, he spearheaded the creation of the iconic Xbox and Xbox 360. After retiring from Microsoft, he shifted his focus to philanthropy, civil advocacy, and storytelling. Robbie Bach joined Microsoft in 1988. Over the next 22 years, he worked in various marketing, general management, and business leadership roles, including supporting the successful launch and expansion of Microsoft Office. As Chief Xbox Officer, he led the creation and development of the Xbox business, including the launch of the Xbox and its highly popular successor, the Xbox 360. He retired from Microsoft as the president of the Entertainment and Devices Division in 2010. In his new role as a civic engineer, Robbie works with corporate, philanthropic, and civic organizations that are driving positive change in our communities. He guest lectures extensively at various colleges and universities and speaks to corporate, civic, and trade association audiences across the country. In 2015, he published his first book, Xbox Revisited, a game plan for corporate and civic renewal. His debut novel featuring Tamika Smith, The Wilkes Insurrection, was published in 2021. He is the former chairman and current board member at the Bipartisan Policy Center. He serves on the National Board of Governors for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and was the chairman of that board from 2009 to 2011. He is also a board member for Habitat for Humanity International and Genius Sports. He previously served as a board member of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, Sonos, Brooks Running Company, the Space Needle, Magic Leap, and Year Up Puget Sound. He is co-owner of Manini's, a company specializing in gluten-free foods. He was an Arjay Miller Scholar at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he earned his MBA, and a Morehead Scholar at the University of North Carolina, where he earned his degree in economics. He and his wife, Pauline, reside in Washington State with their yellow lab, Roscoe. They have 3 grown children and 2 grandchildren. His first novel, The Wilkes Insurrection, introduced readers to Senator Tamika Smith in a high-stakes battle against a domestic terror conspiracy. In his latest novel, The Blockchain Syndicate, Bach continues the gripping saga as Tamika faces a cryptic criminal syndicate threatening America's financial and political foundations. And now on to the show.
In my professional life, I worked at Microsoft for 22 years. Biggest businesses I worked on there, I was the head of marketing for Microsoft Office as we built that business. And then I was the founding chief Xbox officer, who was the original leader who worked with the team to build the Xbox business. I left Microsoft in 2010. Since then, I've been doing what I call civic engineering, which is mostly working with nonprofit boards. I'm on 5 nonprofit boards, 1 for-profit board. I do a lot of guest lecturing, and I've now written 3 books. And the first was a nonfiction civic strategy book, and the last 2 have been techno-political thrillers. So that's, I think, what brought us here to today.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, like you mentioned, you have quite a tenure at Microsoft. You joined the company in 1988. What was it like back then when you joined it, and how did it change over the years? I imagine a lot.
Yeah, when I joined, there were, let's say, plus or minus 3,000 employees at the company. The Redmond office was 6 little buildings around a lake. Actually more of like a dirty pond. And, the place was, it was a small place. I mean, it was a public company, but still very much a startup. Over time, the company expanded and grew, obviously. And the good news about that was there was always new opportunity. There were always new things to go do. So as an employee there, and as somebody who started as an entry-level marketing person. I got to spend 2 years working for Microsoft in Europe, living in Paris. That was an amazing experience. So I had all these growth opportunities while I was there, and then I got to participate in two flagship product sets at the company, and that was just an incredible experience. It was super intense. The place at that time, and I think still, was very competitive, very focused on winning and on being successful in the marketplace. So you had to be on your toes every day, and I learned a lot from that and took a lot away from that, and have now tried to apply those lessons in the nonprofit space and the civic work that I do.
Yeah, and I obviously have been using Microsoft Office for decades at this point. So yeah, do I have you to blame for Clippy though?
No, well, the good news is, so the Clippy, just to be fair, Clippy happened during my 2 years in Europe. So that was,
So you're out of the country for that one. You have no
so
responsibility.
I have plausible deniability uh,
Okay, fair enough. Fair
for
enough.
Clippy. Now, the weird thing about Clippy, if we're just, I know you were making a joke and it is funny, but the weird thing about Clippy is the first kind of early inklings at AI.
I know, right? I had that same thought. Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of the first experience most of us had with that kind of interface, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that they chose Clippy to be the visual interface, okay, maybe that wasn't the smartest choice. But the idea of watching what you were doing and trying to help you,
Yeah,
kind of fundamental to what AI does.
that was ahead of its time for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, definitely. But I also, I had an original Xbox, many happy memories of playing Halo and other games on that for hours at my friends when I should have been probably studying in college. But, it's all good. But yeah, tell me about how that came about. What was like the development of the Xbox like? Because that's been such a huge cultural force these many years.
It's an absolutely crazy story, and I talk about it quite a bit in my first book, Xbox Revisited. And the way to think about it is this: Sony came out with the PlayStation 2. They called it a computer in the living room, which turned out to not actually be, really factually true. But it was a marketing thing, and Microsoft took attention to that and said, well, if anybody's going to put a computer in the living room, it's going to be us. And so we started thinking about how would we compete. Bill looked at some product ideas, some product approaches that had been kicking around the company for a little while. And then he came to Steve and said, this is the product direction we should go. And Steve came to myself and another guy named Rick Thompson, said, can we make a business out of this? Rick went off and did a bunch of business work. And in December of 1999, they approved an absolutely crazy idea, which was to produce the world's most powerful video game console in 18 months, starting from scratch with 20 people. And Rick very quickly left the company. And so Xbox landed in my lap. And so I took over. And for that next 18 months, lived and breathed and ate and spent, 18 to 20 hours a day working on Xbox. It was a crazy experience. I wasn't a great leader in that process. The team managed to get the project over the line. And, in some ways it was a success. We lost, I don't know, $5 to $7 billion doing it, but we got our foothold in the marketplace. And then Xbox 360, which I also led and managed, was just a complete joy. A lot of work still, but I was a better leader. The team was shaped better. We were operating better as a team, and that product really cemented our place in the video game industry. It's one of those weird things where serendipity landed me in the leadership spot. I'm a non-technical, non-gaming person, and I was the founding leader of Xbox. How does that work?
Well, you certainly succeeded. Yeah, the Xbox and Xbox 360 were pretty ubiquitous there. But what kind of challenges did you run into along the way? Because of course I remember the red ring of death being an
Sure.
issue at some point. How did you confront those kind of challenges along the way?
Well, the challenge we had with the first Xbox was we didn't have a great strategy and we had a terrible group culture. I mean, we hired 2,000 people in 18 months. So we had great people. Individually, they were incredibly smart and talented. We were just not a very good team.
Hmm.
And when you have a bad team with an unclear strategy for how you're going to pursue things, um, it's a mosh pit at a concert. It's a United Nations delegation. It was just really hard.
Mm.
And so that was just a tough arm wrestling match. We had all kinds of problems with hardware, software, games, um, building a supply chain, figuring out a brand. This is all challenging, difficult stuff. Xbox 360, Red Ring's death was probably the biggest physical challenge we faced. And that's and in a way I'm most proud of the work we did to resolve that. I mean, obviously it was bad that it happened and that's on us. But the team at that point had come together enough that they rallied around and said, "Hey, this is on us. We're going to fix this." And they
Mm.
did incredible work to make sure people could continue playing their games on Xbox. And Xbox 360 is the highest customer satisfaction product I ever worked on. And yet, we did $1 billion recall and replaced, I don't know, 8, 9 million consoles.
Mhm.
Um, so, that's a tricky thing to pull off, and the team did a really good job simply by focusing on the thing that matters most is make our customers happy.
Mhm. Well, now what I'm going to mention next happened after your tenure at Microsoft, so I don't expect you to take responsibility for what I'm about to say. But my friend Jonathan and I, we talk a lot on the podcast, and he's a gamer, and he's moved away from Xbox over the years to PC. He does all his gaming on the PC now,
Sure.
and he listed a couple of problems that kind of happened with the advent of the Xbox One, mostly.
Yep.
So he didn't like that they removed the backwards compatibility. He didn't like the move away from physical media. You couldn't reshare or sell, games. They were tied to a system. He just thought it was very anti-consumer and just only, benefiting the company. I don't know if you have an opinion about any of those things that happened after your tenure, but that's one reason that he's at least, and I'm sure other people feel the same way. They've moved maybe away from the Xbox for some of those reasons. What do you think of that?
Well, look, I don't think it's undeniable that there were mistakes made in launching Xbox One. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it was. You didn't even mention what I think was the biggest mistake, which was the way they priced it.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even get to the price. Yeah, go ahead. Yes,
Like the
exactly.
truth is on consoles, generally speaking, people don't love or care about the hardware itself. So the idea that you're going to sell a console at a premium price is sort of an oxymoron. It just doesn't work. And we'd already learned this lesson once before. So the fact that the team repeated the mistake is what really annoys me.
Right.
The other mistakes that you highlight were clearly mistakes. Some mistakes in strategy, some mistakes in implementation, but clearly a mistake. Now, I will say that when Phil Spencer took over, he worked really hard to repair that image with the community. And while I think some people left during that generation, a lot of them have come back. And I think Phil's done an excellent job managing and running that business and continuing to build it. So in some ways, it's a lesson in making a mistake, really damaging a brand, and then rebuilding it and recovering it. And I think he's done a spectacular job doing that.
Right. You've mentioned that been very active since you retired from Microsoft, and one organization that you've been involved with is the Bipartisan Policy Center.
Sure.
I'd be interested to know more about why that's important to you, and just what do you think of the general lack of bipartisanship for the most part in Washington these days? It seems to be more polarized than ever.
Yeah, I think, well, I'd say a couple things. Why is the BPC important to me? The biggest thing for me is that, if you want to get anything constructive done in a country of our size with our level of diversity and dispersion of ideas, you have to find ways to come together to reach some acceptable middle grounds. There's just no way to get anything done otherwise. And so to me, it's critically important to the country and to our future. So if you're going to be what I call a civic engineer, if you're going to work to help communities get better, to help, nonprofit organizations get better, to help government work better, bipartisanship just has to be part of your playbook. It has to be the way you operate. It has to be the way you work. As to what's going on in DC, I think you have two things going on in DC. I think there's a lot of partisan posturing in the press. There's a lot of partisan activity. There's a lot of partisan work. Behind the scenes, there's actually more bipartisanship going on than you might think. And there's a lot of good things that have gotten done as a result. Now, unfortunately, the big things that matter are really hard. They become third rails. How do we solve the budget deficit? How do we deal with immigration? These are things that are third rail issues that are really tough. And now you have an additional problem, which is leave aside whether it's partisan or bipartisan, the separation between the executive branch and the legislative branch and the usurpation of power from the executive branch is a huge problem.
Yeah.
And that makes partisanship really difficult, or
Right.
bipartisanship really difficult. So, we have issues. No debate about that. The BPC is doing great work. I'm on a commission they're working on right now on the American workforce, which has been fascinating. And there's real issues with making sure we have a workforce for the future, our education system, our job training system, a number of other areas. I think it's powerful that they're doing the work, and I think hopefully leaders will step forward to lead us out of what I see as a little bit of a dark hole right now.
Yeah, that's a great point about the legislative branch. It just seems like they've willingly given up their check and balance to the executive at this point. And it's like, well, don't you want power too? Like, isn't that the whole like way the system works? Like
Well, the problem is they define their power as their party.
yes. Okay, that's
And
true. Yeah. Mhm.
so when you have a Republican in the presidency who wants to have all the executive power, the Republicans in Congress have allowed that to happen.
Yeah, well, and then the other part of it is too, it actually strengthens the judiciary beyond its normal scope because they keep throwing these cases back saying, well, Congress should pass a law about it. It's like, yeah, right. Good luck. Like that's not
Well,
going to happen.
the real problem with the judiciary is that the process by design works slowly.
True. Yeah.
So when you have the executive branch on a blitzkrieg of activity
Hmm.
and a congressional branch a legislative branch that doesn't fight back, and people go turn to the courts, which is the right next step, the courts just don't respond quickly enough. They're
Right.
not designed to respond quickly enough.
Yes.
And so speed overcomes what's probably legal and what's right. And,
Yeah.
that's a tricky problem.
Definitely. Well, thank you for humoring me on all those questions. I
Oh,
couldn't,
no, it's all good.
you have quite the background, so I had to I had to ask you about some of it. So,
Well, the truth is it's good background drop because even in my fiction work,
uh,
as you know, as you've been reading,
yep, I'm reading right
many of
now.
these many of these themes come through in the
Hmm.
story.
No, I was going to ask you about that. Definitely. No, it comes right through. Absolutely.
Right.
Very engaging. But yeah, so this is the second novel you've written with your protagonist, Tamika Smith. Honestly, I'm reading your the second book, the new one now,
Right.
and she kind of reminds me of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan a little bit because she started as a soldier and was later thrust into politics through a series of thrilling events. And how did you conceive of this character, and why was she someone you wanted as your protagonist?
Well, it's so interesting. You might have said, "Oh, I started out with that in mind," and if I'm blunt and honest, I had no idea that's the direction I was going. So in the first book, The Wilkes Insurrection, I started writing by writing 100 pages about the day in the life of five people. No plot, no idea that I was even writing a thriller. And so I just wrote about these five people and what was going on in their day in their life and how they might interact. And Tamika was the third person I wrote, and not the person who I thought the book would be about. I did not think of her as she was a central character, but she was not the center of the story. And there's a number of other characters, Bryce Roscovich, Jeriel Jessup, who weren't even amongst the five people, and they are now main characters. So, I started on that journey. And when I wrote the 25 pages on Tamika, I kind of fell in love with the character. And I fell in love with her strengths, her weaknesses, her flaws, her energy, her patriotism, and what she represented. And so the story suddenly started revolving around her. And pretty soon, the crash that happens at her Air Force base was caused by a bomb explosion and a terrorist attack. And pretty soon, I'm writing a political thriller.
Right.
And that's the direction. And then the story had to get written from there.
Hmm.
Um, and put together again. The first draft of that book was 550 pages. I had to
Oh,
cut to it.
wow.
I had to cut 200 pages of writing because I was writing the backstory while I was figuring out the plot.
Oh,
And a first time fiction writer. Now, I think the book I'm incredibly proud of the way it came out. I think it's a great book, and it's a super lead into the Blockchain Syndicate, which is Tamika's current adventure.
cool. Yeah, I'll have to go back and read that one after this one. It's very gripping. Yeah, it's a page turner for sure. You're a man, obviously. You're writing as a woman or in the voice of a woman, main character. What were the challenges writing a woman protagonist, and what has been the feedback from women that have read the book?
Well, it's more than that. Just to explain
Mhm.
the problem a little bit more, Tamika and I aren't, our backgrounds aren't the same.
Right.
She's a mixed race woman who grew up in the military, who was an Olympic class sprinter, and and goes on to be a U.S. senator. I'm none of those things.
Right. Exactly.
I'm, I didn't serve in the military. I served as an altar boy, so I'm just a completely different person. And so for me, in a way, it's helped me write Tamika better. I find that when I write male characters, and I write, in particular when I write Johnny Humboldt, who's probably the most like me in some senses, um, I have a hard time distinguishing one male character from another. It takes real work for me to differentiate my male characters. And in Tamika's case, in Margaret Humboldt's case, in Phoenix Humboldt, the three main female characters, Shay Roscovich from the previous book, those are the main female characters. They are naturally different for me, and I cannot explain it. I
Mhm.
did obviously early on have I have some female friends who two of whom are both writers, and I asked them to read it to make sure that you know I was headed down the right path, and they both commented back saying your female characters are better than your male characters. Keep going.
Mhm.
And so that's where I ended. And then before I published the Wilkes Insurrection, I had some people in the military read it, women in the military read it, and I had a couple of people of color read it to make sure that I had done the right set of things to create a real character,
Right.
one who was faithful to who she was. And so, as a writer, you do what you think is right, and then it's sort of the Ronald Reagan thing, you trust but verify.
Right.
And so that's what I've done.
That's great. Well, no, I think it's a good move because sometimes you read somebody's book and it's like basically the author but with a slightly different name. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of copy and paste into like someone else and you're like, okay, I see what's going on here. But that wasn't the case here. This is definitely someone different. So
Yeah. And like as a writer, it's way more interesting.
sure, definitely. Yeah.
I would find writing myself as a character to be immensely boring
Right.
and not very captivating for the audience.
Yeah,
Tamika, or even a number of the other characters, even my villains, which I enjoy writing, they bring out something in me that I didn't know I had.
definitely. Well, so I don't know how much you want to say about the plot of this new book, but it is called The Blockchain Syndicate. And I am to the part where they explain kind of what the meaning of that is. And I think it's a pretty clever idea. Maybe you could at least explain what a blockchain
Sure.
is, and then maybe I don't know how much you want to reveal about, what's going on in the book, but how it relates to the nefarious plot at work.
Well, the best way to describe the book is to talk about it as sort of a mix between old school espionage and new age cybercrime. That to me is the way those two things together, with the trick that the people perpetuating those sets of crimes are trying to take down the government. So that's the general thing. Now, blockchain is this set of technologies that's basically a anonymous register in the cloud. And so when you write something to the blockchain, it tracks the transaction, it keeps track of the transaction. So it's this massive registry. And on one hand, super transparent. You can see all the transactions happening, but it's incredibly opaque because you can't see who's pursuing them. So think of this like a mafia mob without knowing who the Don is. and without knowing who's directing the mob. That's what the blockchain syndicate is.
Right.
And so when now you're the FBI or you're Tamika Smith or anybody else trying to figure out what's going on, you can see the things happening, but figuring out who's behind it is super difficult
Yeah.
and requires some incredible, both plain old investigative FBI work and some incredible cyber investigative work from my friend Bryce Roscoe, who's sort of my white hat hacker in the plot.
Hmm. Talk to me about making up some of these characters. Because I always think I'm not a fiction writer. I'm a journalist, so I'm very, focused on factual nonfiction writing usually. So I don't usually the people are just there, you know what I mean? So I don't
I
have to
do.
create them out of thin air. What is your process for creating people? How do you pick the names for people that you're making up? Like this is like a whole world you have to create.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Some of the people who I create are amalgams.
Mhm.
So they are a prototype, an archetype for, in this case, a couple of people from Silicon Valley. And they
Mhm.
aren't patterned after any one person in Silicon Valley, but they are archetypes for some of the types of characters I've run into in the Valley and their attitudes about making money at all costs. And I think that's obviously not every venture capitalist believes that. Not every venture capitalist acts that way, but a number of people do. And so I've taken that archetype and created this character, Lee Bowen. Now, selecting Lee Bowen's name is sort of a little bit of an Easter egg in the book, so I'll leave that aside for a second. But one of my other villains is a Russian spy named Nastya Andropov. And her backstory, I wanted, her character is about loyalty to Mother Russia. So I wanted her to have a connection with the Soviet Union. Andropov as her last name. Her grandfather was Yuri Andropov, who was the supreme leader of the Soviet Union, who ultimately ushered it towards its demise. And so her particular backstory is about trying to rebuild Mother Russia to its previous glory. And the name comes directly from that. And Nastya is just a nice way of saying nasty. So, there
Ah,
you go.
there you go. Nice. I like it. But you did mention earlier that you do include some kind of rip from the headlines bits in your. I mean, the world. How close is the world of the story to the world that we live in? Because you, I didn't read your first book, so maybe I don't know how much you explain about this in the first book, but January 6th you mentioned in the book,
Hmm.
so that happened in the world of your story.
Yep.
Is Trump president in your story?
Oh,
Who?
you'll discover he's
Okay,
definitely
okay. I guess I got to keep reading for that part.
you'll discover he's definitely president.
I see.
The
Interesting.
challenge here is writing a fiction thriller novel that's hugely contemporary and
Hmm.
not making sure you stay focused on the story and stay focused on the characters and focused on the plot and focused on what's going on. Yes, there's themes and messages that I hope people walk away with from the story, but I can't get caught up in that. If I get caught up in that, then it becomes a political book, and that's not the goal, and nor is that the outcome. That's not the way the blockchain syndicate reads. So you have to dip it in the contemporary milieu of what's going on, and at the same time, make sure you stay focused on writing a great techno thriller. And in my case, I would say a character-based techno thriller. Um, and so that's what I've tried to accomplish. So Trump is certainly in the book. There's a discussion right up front of the election commission that investigated
Hmm.
January 6th. That's the world we live in. And
Right.
you just can't run from it, nor should you hide. Now, the other thing I'll say just quickly is a number of things that happened, in particular in the Wilkes Insurrection, but even in the blockchain syndicate, are things I wrote well before similar things happened in real life. And as you get further through blockchain syndicate, you'll see similarities to things that have suddenly happened. And I wrote blockchain syndicate, the basic draft was done a year and a half ago.
Right. Yeah. No, that was I was thinking you probably had to have had this in long before like current events were taking place. So yeah, it feels very contemporary. So you whatever you did, I think you did a good job of keeping it relevant, even though things change so quickly.
Yep.
But you do mention something else in the book that is very contemporary, which is AI.
Yep.
What is your general feelings about AI? Obviously, Microsoft is heavily moving in that direction.
Well, my general feeling is that AI, on the one hand, is like every other big technology in the sense that it is neither good nor bad. It just is.
Mm,
I don't think blockchain is particularly good or bad. It just is. I don't think social media is particularly good or bad. It just is. Now, people use it for good or bad. There are consequences from it that are good or bad, and we have to deal with those consequences in a better way than we have. And certainly our government and our corporate leaders have to deal with those consequences in a better way than they have. AI is slightly different, I would say, in a couple of ways. One, I think it is one of those generational platform shifts, the equivalent to going from paper to computers and IBM mainframes and then going to PCs and then going to the internet. It's a tectonic shift. And so it's not just blockchain isn't a tectonic shift. It's a really cool piece of technology. I think of AI as a tectonic shift. So that's one way it's different. The other way it's different is it gets a little bit closer to humanity. And that strikes people in a challenging way. And I get why it does. But, interestingly, none of the words in the story were written by ChatGPT.
good.
I wrote every one.
If I found that out, I would probably stop reading. So
Oh,
thank you
no,
for doing
exactly.
that.
That's exactly the point. Now, just to be clear and talk about how the technology can be super valuable, I'm a one-man marketing show. And so I said I want to do a video trailer for the book. So I used this tool called InVideo. And if you go to the website, blockchainsyndicate.com, you will find a video trailer that was done in AI. And it's really good.
Gotcha.
And it's not perfect, but it's as good as I would have gotten going to a small local shop doing it and cost me, I don't know, $250.
Well, it is at least in keeping with your techno thriller theme. So it's definitely on brand. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so it just makes the point that all of these things can be good, they can be bad. AI will be immensely beneficial for society. I believe that. And it poses some risks that we have to manage, and we're not managing very effectively.
mm,
And then there's the whole separate question about is investing trillions of dollars in, um, chipset technologies and servers really the right thing to do? That's a really interesting question. And the social impact on energy prices of corporations chewing up the energy supply. I mean, these are all real policy issues that we're just not dealing with.
yeah, well, and restarting 3 Mile Island, I saw recently too.
Well,
Um,
the reality is if you're in the environmental space, AI is a really bad thing. Um, and yet it may force us to make some choices about technologies that we need to make anyway.
mhm,
Nuclear technology, if you look at all the different types of technologies and say which one of these could scale over the next 10 to 20 years to actually supply a meaningful percentage of our rising electricity needs, nuclear may be one of the only practical ones available.
mhm. No, I've definitely heard that argument from the even environmentalist
Right,
side to get nuclear going. So
right.
but yeah, well, we've talked about a lot of things, but was there anything else that you wanted to mention about the book that we didn't get to already? With a thriller, I never know how much to say. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
to,
I think the thing that I would say that makes this unique as a thriller, I mean, there's the technical element, there's the contemporary element and what's going on in the country. But I think what I love most about the book is the personal element. Um, I think these characters are not the classic, slightly wooden thriller characters. I think they are well-rounded. They're humans. They come across that way. They have failings that way. They have strengths. They have weaknesses. They have a real EQ and emotion. That's my goal. And, to the extent you read it and come away with that, then I've succeeded in my effort to create this character-based thriller genre that I think can be really powerful.
Definitely. Well, thank you for taking all this time to talk here. I really appreciate it. Is there any advice you have to aspiring authors? You were once somebody that had not written 3 books. So what would you say to people who want to be somebody who has written
Well,
3 books?
the first thing I'd say is decide why you want to write. So if you want to write because you have business ideas, or you want to write nonfiction, or you want to write about your biography or the story of your professional life or whatever, that's a great reason to write. You should sit down and do it. There's lots of different ways to do that. You can do it yourself. You can do it with a ghostwriter. You can do a combination of both. That's a powerful reason to do it. If you want to do it as a career and you say, oh, I'm going to go from being a doctor to being an author, and I'm going to replace my doctor income with my author income, um, then you have some serious training to do, because it's a tough business. I mean, making money as an author is really, really challenging.
Yeah.
For me, it's, I want to make money. I want people to buy the book. I hope it's successful. But it's, I chose to do it because I'm passionate about it, because I think I have something to say. But the people who are friends of mine who are real authors, they work incredibly hard. It's not easy to make it your life income source, and so it's a challenging business.
Right. Definitely. Well, one question I do always ask before we go is, what music have you been listening to lately?
Oh, that's uh, I am a decided pop artist guy.
Good. I like pop.
And I listen to music when I write. There's a
Me too.
playlist. There's a whole series of playlists for the characters. Go to the Wilkes Insurrection website. There's a playlist for the story, and there's
Oh,
playlists for the
nice.
characters. So that'll give you some idea of the things I'm listening to right now. I will admit, a Taylor Swift fan. So I listen
I,
to a
hey,
lot of Taylor Swift.
that's great.
I listen to a lot of Ed Sheeran.
Nice.
Um, I listen to a lot of Train. Uh,
Nice.
I'm a big fan of Train. John Mellencamp is on my playlist.
Hey, you're talking to somebody from Southern Indiana, so
Yeah, there you go.
I know all
There you
about
go.
it.
So you get some sense for the, kind of
Sure.
folk rock and pop music that I enjoy
Nice.
listening
Yes. Well, let's see. Ed Sheeran. I like what he does with. He uses loops a lot. He's on a tour where he just uses a loop pedal, and he plays along with it, which is really cool. I like him a lot. My daughter Emerald is 8 years old, and she has a weekly Taylor Swift club called the Tay Tay Club. She makes newspapers called the Taylor Times for these meetings. She also plays piano and guitar and is learning several Taylor Swift songs. So yes, I've been initiated into the Swifties through my daughter. Um, so yeah, right there with you, definitely.
Well, I go through cycles, right? I go through times when I'm listening to different people and trying to, understand, new music and
Hmm.
find new music to listen to. And, I get to a place and I find a new song, and you just go with it. I've been spending a bunch of time with Shinedown. Uh,
Nice,
they have some really cool music. So, you find new stuff, and then you love the artists you love.
definitely. Well, that's a great way to go about it. Well, hey, it was great to talk to you, and you're welcome to come back anytime. I'm sure we'd have a million things to talk about. So
I enjoyed it, and I'll be starting in, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. I'll start writing what's next. So
nice. There you
maybe
go.
I'll be back for you.
Absolutely. That'll be great. Awesome. Well, thank you again, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Rob.
All right.